This is the second part of this video. If you haven't watched the first part of this Rolex's Rags to Riches story, go watch the first part. Its link is in the description. In this video, I am going to answer what makes Rolex different. Why are Rolex so expensive? Well, when you Google this, the answer seems straightforward. That basically says Rolex are just really well made. This is a nice sentiment that Rolex charge so much because their watches will stand the test of time. But of course, that's certainly not the full story. You don't need to drop tens of thousands of dollars just to get a watch that will last a long time. So firstly, let's state the obvious. Rolex is not just a watch, it's a status symbol. In fact, it seems to be a fairly universal symbol of wealth, from rappers on the streets of New York to members of the British Royal. Countless iconic figures have formed Rolexes, including John F. Kennedy, Winston Churchill, Elvis Presley, Martin Luther King, and many more. And this level of status is clearly thanks to Rolex's high visibility marketing strategy, where it associates itself with success. For example, Rolex is the official timekeeper for both Wimbledon and Formula One. And they sponsor many prestigious events that wealthy people watch or attend, such as golf championships. You'll also see Rolexes in movies like James Bond wearing a Rolex, and the company pays big stars to endorse the product, like Roger Federer reportedly earning $8 million per year from Rolex. Now, of course, a Rolex is not just all hype marketing. Rolex does use very premium materials, which are rigorously tested to a high standard, which of course comes with a higher price tag. And clearly there is manual work required by hand to create high-quality mechanical watches, and Swiss salaries are some of the highest in the world. Plus, the company also invests heavily in its own scientific labs to research and create new watches. However, an interesting post from someone who spoke with a watchmaker estimated that a Rolex that sells for around $5,000 could only be around $500 to make. And some other estimates put their profit margins as up to 20 times the cost of making the watch, with the rest of the profits being spent on Rolex's advertising and sponsorships to keep the brand exclusive and desirable. Of course, if Rolex didn't do that, it wouldn't have the same status, which is why most people want a Rolex in the first place. And admittedly, because of Rolex's secrecy, we don't know the exact cost for sure. But what is that even though Rolex watches are high quality, a lot of watch enthusiasts say there are higher quality watches at cheaper prices. Rolex are not the rarest or most expensive watches in the world, and the extremely wealthy or die-hard watch enthusiasts are much less likely to get a Rolex, as there are other luxury watch brands they'd like people for. The difference with those other brands is that they spend much less on marketing, which is why most people outside of the watch community have no idea they even exist. Instead, Rolex is an upper-middle-class aspirational brand because they are relatively expensive. They are obtainable to the middle class. A Rolex is affordable if someone really saved up. So with Rolex, you're evidently paying a lot for the brand and its prestige. There's even a rumor that Hans once said, only great marketing is needed to make a company successful, because of course, high prices enable Rolex to pay more influential people to wear their products or sponsor prestigious events, which creates more demand, which allows them to charge higher prices. However, in order to still maintain this image of prestige and exclusivity, Rolex only sell their watches through authorized dealers, and there's generally not special offers or sales. In fact, Rolex reportedly even repurchase old stock from stores to make sure no excess stock is sold at discounts, because being perceived as a discount product would be bad for the brand image, and they don't want to make their products seem easy to obtain. A great example of this is when Hans realized they were missing out on a lot of sales from people who couldn't afford a Rolex, but rather make a cheaper Rolex model. They introduced a separate brand called Tuda. The watches are very similar, but they were made under a different brand name, so they didn't risk diluting Rolex's brand by making it too accessible and affordable. And that's damaging Rolex's position as that symbol. But this goes even further, as it's believed that Rolex artificially creates scarcity for their product. You see, Rolex makes about 800,000 to 1 million watches per year, which is way less than the demand for their watches. But the reason for the shortages is likely that they deliberately limit the supply to keep the demand high, which allows them to keep pricing high, as the wait time can range from 6 months to 3 years. Authorized dealers have sometimes claimed that the company is supplying the market to drive the price up and engaging in price fixing worldwide to maintain the value of their watches. Because whilst it's true, their watches do take time to make, it's unlikely to be as much time as some say. Because there are reports that a single watch takes a whole year to produce, as Rolex doesn't outsource production. When in reality there are conflicting reports that question that and suggest some small parts of the watches are outsourced. And that, contrary to popular belief, Rolex watches are not entirely made by hand, with machines being used at some stages. Again, this doesn't mean Rolexes aren't high quality. It's clearly a lot of work and precision goes into each one. But what it does mean is that if Rolex really wanted to produce more watch, they probably could, but they prefer there to be some unfulfilled demand and a waiting list. That's not a limitation because of how long each watch takes to make. It's just a smart business strategy. What's perhaps most interesting about this is that Rolex can be described as Ave in goods, which is a product that contradicts normal supply and demand. Because when you're normally buying something, let's say a pint of beer, the lower, the more the demand. If a bar cut their price to $1 per pint, people would be queuing up and buying loads. But on the flip side, the more that the price increases, the less people would want to buy it. However, with Avalon Good, when the price increases, the demand increases too. In other words, higher prices lead to more people wanting it. That's because wine goods are often purchased for signaling status. For example, if Rolex started slashing their prices massively, there'd likely be less demand as Rolex would. Premium perception if everyone had one. The good news is even though a lot of Rolex's price doesn't just come from the quality of the watch, that doesn't mean it's not worth it. Thanks to Rolex's rich heritage and reputation, they generally hold their value or can even increase in value if well maintained. That's allowing people to view it as an investment that will still be worth a similar price even years after use, something which very few other watch brands have achieved. The crazy part is Rolex was initially considered more of a tool watch for its utility than a fine watch or collector's item. But through its marketing and sales strategy, the brand has moved towards luxury instead and subsequently become one of the most valuable brands in the world. And this story of Rolex undoubtedly has some useful business lessons for all of us. But now, if you want to see more this type of video watch, click the video coming on your screen. I think you'll really like this one. But anyways, thanks for watching this video to the end.